The rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the cracked pavement of the parking lot. Jack Malone stood under the flickering fluorescent light of the diner's awning, his uniform soaked through, his fists clenched at his sides. He had just been fired. Not for incompetence, not for insubordination, but for defending a veteran service dog. The memory of the confrontation replayed in his mind like a broken record. It had started with a man in a suit, some corporate type, yelling at the veteran, a grizzled man with a prosthetic leg and a service dog named Duke. The man had claimed Duke was disrupting the peace in the diner. Jack, the diner's manager, had stepped in, his voice calm but firm. The dog stays. He's a service animal. The argument escalated, and when the man tried to grab Duke's leash, Jack intervened. One shove, one threat, and Jack was out of a job. Now, standing in the rain, Jack felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had rent due, bills stacking up, and no safety net. But as he looked down at Duke, who had followed him outside, he knew he'd do it all over again. The veteran, a man named Tom, had thanked him with tears in his eyes before disappearing into the storm. Jack was about to get into his car when the sound of boots splashing through puddles caught his attention. He turned, squinting through the rain, and saw a figure approaching. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a dark jacket with the hood pulled up. As he stepped under the awning, he pushed the hood back, revealing a face that was both hardened and commanding. His eyes were sharp, like they'd seen too much and yet missed nothing. "Jack Malone?" the man asked, his voice low and steady. Jack hesitated. "Yeah." "Who's asking?" The man extended a hand. "Commander Ryan Holt, Navy SEALs." Jack shook his hand, feeling the calluses and the strength in the grip. "What can I do for you, Commander?" Ryan's gaze shifted to Duke, who was sitting quietly by Jack's side. "I heard what happened in there. You stood up for one of my men. That doesn't go unnoticed." Jack frowned. "Tom's one of yours?" Was Ryan corrected. "He served under me. Good man. Lost his leg in Afghanistan. Duke's been his lifeline since." He paused, studying Jack. "You lost your job defending him. That's not something many people would do." Jack shrugged, trying to downplay it. "Just did what was right." Ryan's lips curved into a faint smile. "Right doesn't always pay the bills, does it?" Before Jack could respond, Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. It was simple, black with silver lettering. No title, no company name, just a phone number. "I've got a proposition for you," Ryan said. "But it's not the kind of thing we discuss in the rain. Meet me tomorrow. 0800 hours. This address." He handed Jack the card. "Bring Duke." Jack stared at the card, his mind racing. What kind of proposition? Ryan's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. The kind that changes lives. "If you're up for it." And with that, he turned and walked back into the rain, disappearing as quickly as he'd arrived. The next morning, Jack found himself standing outside an unmarked building on the outskirts of town. The place looked abandoned, with boarded-up windows and a chain-link fence surrounding it. But as he approached, a side door opened, and Ryan stepped out. "You came," Ryan said, as if he'd expected nothing less. "I'm curious," Jack admitted. "And desperate." Ryan chuckled. "Honesty. I like that. Come on in." Inside, the building was nothing like Jack expected. The walls were lined with high-tech equipment, maps, and screens displaying data he couldn't begin to understand. Men and women in tactical gear moved about with purpose, their conversations hushed but intense. Ryan led Jack to a room where Duke was greeted with a pat on the head. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. Jack obeyed, his eyes darting around the room. "What is this place?" Jack asked. "Let's just say it's a place where people like you, people who do the right thing no matter the cost, find a new purpose," Ryan explained. "We're a private organization. We handle problems that others can't or won't. And we're always looking for people with your particular set of skills." Jack raised an eyebrow. "My skills? I managed a diner." Ryan leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You stood up to a man twice your size to protect a veteran and his dog. You didn't back down even when it cost you everything. That's not just management. That's leadership. That's courage." Jack felt a flicker of pride, but it was quickly overshadowed by doubt. "I'm not a soldier. I'm not trained for whatever this is." "Training can be provided," Ryan said. "What can't be taught is the willingness to do what's right. That's why I'm offering you a place here. But it's not an easy path. It's dangerous. It's demanding. And once you're in, there's no going back." Jack glanced at Duke, who was now lying at his feet, content. He thought about Tom, about the sacrifices he'd made. He thought about the job he'd lost, the life he'd been struggling to hold on to. And then he thought about the chance to do something that mattered. "I'm in," Jack said, his voice steady. Ryan nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Good. Welcome to the team." Over the next few weeks, Jack was thrown into a world he could never have imagined. He trained alongside former soldiers, intelligence operatives, and specialists from every field imaginable. He learned to handle weapons, to navigate hostile environments, to think on his feet. And through it all, Duke was by his side, proving to be more than just a companion. He was an asset, with a keen sense of smell and an uncanny ability to sense danger. Their first mission came sooner than Jack expected. A small town in the Midwest had been overrun by a militia group, and the local authorities were outmatched. The team was sent in to extract a group of hostages and dismantle the operation. The mission was a baptism by fire. Jack's heart pounded as they moved through the darkened streets, the sound of gunfire echoing in the distance. Duke moved silently beside him, his ears twitching at every sound. When they reached the compound where the hostages were being held, Jack's training kicked in. He moved with precision, his mind focused on the task at hand. But it was Duke who saved the day. As they cleared a room, the dog suddenly growled, his body tense. Jack froze, his eyes scanning the shadows. That's when he saw it. A tripwire, barely visible in the dim light. One wrong step, and the entire room would have been blown to pieces. "Good boy," Jack whispered, his hand resting on Duke's head. The mission was a success. The hostages were freed, the militia was dismantled, and Jack had proven himself in the field. But as they returned to base, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Ryan met them at the hangar, his expression unreadable. "You did good," he said, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "But this is just the start. There's a lot more out there that needs fixing." Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. He had lost one life, but he had gained another. One that was dangerous, unpredictable, and filled with purpose. And as he looked down at Duke, he knew he wasn't alone. The rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. Jack's life had become a whirlwind of missions, training, and moments of quiet reflection. Each operation was more intense than the last, pushing him to his limits and beyond. But with Duke by his side, he felt a strange sense of balance. The dog wasn't just a partner. He was a reminder of why Jack had chosen this path, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. One evening, after a grueling day of drills, Jack found himself in the makeshift barracks, sitting on the edge of his bunk. Duke lay at his feet, chewing on a well-worn toy. The room was quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound. Jack's mind wandered back to the diner, to the moment he'd lost everything. Felt like a lifetime ago. Ryan walked in, his presence commanding as always. He tossed a file onto the small table in front of Jack. New mission. High priority. Jack picked up the file, flipping it open. The first page was a photograph of a woman in her mid-30s, her face framed by dark hair. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a scientist specializing in bioweapons. The rest of the file detailed her recent disappearance and the suspicion that she'd been taken by a shadowy organization known only as the Syndicate. "Who are they?" Jack asked, his eyes still scanning the documents. Ryan leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "The Syndicate is a global network. They deal in everything: arms trafficking, human smuggling, bioweapons. If it's illegal and profitable, they're involved. Dr. Vasquez was working on a countermeasure to one of their projects. They took her to shut her down." Jack closed the file, his jaw tightening. "Where do we start?" "We've got a lead," Ryan said. "A former Syndicate operative turned informant. He's agreed to talk, but only to you." Jack frowned. "Why me?" Ryan's lips twitched in a half-smile. "Let's just say your reputation precedes you. You've got a way with people. And dogs." He nodded toward Duke, who had perked up at the sound of his name. The meeting with the informant took place in a dimly lit warehouse on the edge of the city. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust. Jack stood in the center of the room, Duke at his side, while Ryan and a few other team members waited in the shadows. The informant arrived late, his movements jittery, his eyes darting around the room. He was a wiry man with a scar running down the side of his face. He introduced himself as Victor. "You're the one they call Malone," Victor said, his accent thick. "The man who stands up for the little guy." Jack nodded. "And you're the one who's going to help us find Dr. Vasquez." Victor hesitated, his eyes flicking to Duke. "The Syndicate," They're not like anything you've faced before. They don't play by rules. They don't have limits. Neither do we, Jack said, his voice steady. Victor studied him for a moment, then nodded. Dr. Vasquez is being held in a facility in the mountains. It's heavily guarded, but there's a way in. A service tunnel used for supply deliveries. It's not on any of their official schematics. Jack exchanged a glance with Ryan, who gave a slight nod. How do we get in? Jack asked. Victor pulled a folded map from his jacket and handed it to Jack. This will show you the way, but be careful. The syndicate has eyes everywhere. And if they catch you, he trailed off, his expression grim. We'll handle it, Jack said, taking the map. The mission to rescue Dr. Vasquez was the most dangerous yet. The facility was a fortress, perched on a mountainside with sheer cliffs on 3 sides. The team moved under the cover of darkness, their movements precise and silent. Duke led the way, his keen senses alerting them to patrols and traps. When they reached the service tunnel, Jack's heart was pounding. The air was cold, the silence oppressive. They moved quickly, their weapons at the ready. The tunnel led them deep into the facility, where they found Dr. Vasquez in a locked cell. She looked up as they entered, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Who are you? She whispered. We're here to get you out, Jack said, his voice calm. He knelt to pick the lock, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. But as the lock clicked open, alarms blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, and the sound of boots echoed down the corridors. We've got company, Ryan said, his voice tight. Move! They raced through the facility, Duke leading the way. The syndicate's guards were everywhere, their weapons blazing. Jack returned fire, his training kicking in. He moved with precision, his focus razor-sharp. But as they neared the exit, a figure stepped into their path. He was tall, with cold eyes and a smirk that sent a chill down Jack's spine. In his hand, he held a remote detonator. You really think you can just walk out of here? The man said, his voice dripping with malice. Jack's grip tightened on his weapon. Who are you? The man's smirk widened. Call me the architect. And this facility is my masterpiece. Too bad you won't live to see it completed. He pressed the button on the detonator, and the ground shook as explosions rocked the facility. The ceiling above them began to collapse, chunks of concrete and metal raining down. Run! Ryan shouted. They sprinted for the exit, the world crumbling around them. Jack grabbed Dr. Vasquez's hand, pulling her along as Duke barked furiously, urging them forward. They burst out of the facility just as the entire structure collapsed in a deafening roar. Jack fell to his knees, gasping for air. Dr. Vasquez was safe, the mission was a success. But the architect's words lingered in his mind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ryan approached, his expression grim. You did good, Malone. But this is just the beginning. The syndicate won't stop. And neither will we. Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. He looked down at Duke, who was panting but alert, his eyes fixed on Jack as if to say, I'm with you. The storm was far from over. But Jack was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. For Tom. For Duke. For everyone who couldn't fight for themselves. And as the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, Jack Malone stood tall, ready for the next battle. The aftermath of the mission left the team battered but alive. Dr. Elena Vasquez was safely extracted, her knowledge of the syndicate's bioweapons program now a critical asset in the fight against them. But as Jack sat in the debriefing room, staring at the map Victor had provided, he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface. The architect's words echoed in his mind. This is my masterpiece. What did that mean? What else was out there? Ryan entered the room, his expression unreadable as always. He dropped a new file on the table in front of Jack. We've got a problem. Jack opened the file, his stomach sinking as he saw the contents. It was a list of names, scientists, politicians, military officials, all marked with a single word. Target. At the bottom of the list was a single line of text. The architect's design. What is this? Jack asked, his voice tight. The syndicate's next move, Ryan said. They're not just building weapons. They're reshaping the world. Eliminating anyone who could stand in their way. And they're starting with these people. Jack's eyes scanned the list, stopping on a name he recognized. Senator Margaret Hayes, a vocal advocate for veterans' rights and a staunch opponent of private military contractors. They're going after her first, he said, looking up at Ryan. Ryan nodded. She's giving a speech tomorrow at the Capitol. If we don't stop them, she's dead. The next day, Jack found himself in Washington, D.C., blending into the crowd gathered outside the Capitol building. Duke was by his side, his harness discreetly concealing the fact that he was anything more than a service dog. The team was spread out, each member positioned to cover a different angle. Ryan's voice crackled in Jack's earpiece. "Stay sharp. The architect doesn't miss." Jack's eyes scanned the crowd, his instincts on high alert. Senator Hayes was on the podium now, her voice strong and clear as she spoke about the need for accountability and justice. Jack admired her courage, but it also made his chest tighten. She was a target, and she didn't even know it. Then he saw it, a glint of light from a nearby building. A sniper's scope. "Sniper!" Jack barked into his comms, already moving. "Northwest building, 3rd floor." The crowd erupted into chaos as shots rang out. Jack shoved through the panicked masses, Duke at his heels. He reached the building and burst inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time. When he reached the 3rd floor, he found the room empty except for a single sniper rifle, still warm, propped against the window. "He's gone," Jack said, his voice tight with frustration. Ryan's voice came through the earpiece. "Not for long. We've got eyes on a vehicle leaving the area. Black SUV. Heading south." Jack didn't hesitate. He raced back down the stairs and into the street, where a team vehicle was waiting. Duke jumped into the passenger seat as Jack slammed the door shut and hit the gas. The SUV was fast, but Jack was relentless. He weaved through traffic, his focus razor-sharp. The chase led them to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. Jack parked a distance away, moving on foot with Duke. The complex was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel under their boots. Inside, the building was a maze of rusted machinery and shadowy corners. Jack moved cautiously, his weapon drawn. Duke's ears twitched, his body tense as he sniffed the air. Then he growled low and deep. Jack froze. "What is it, boy?" Before Duke could respond, a voice echoed through the space. "I have to admit, I'm impressed." Jack spun around, his weapon raised. The architect stepped out of the shadows, his hands in the air but his expression calm. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. But you're too late." "Too late for what?" Jack demanded, his finger tightening on the trigger. The architect smiled. "To stop the design. It's already in motion. The syndicate doesn't need me anymore. They have everything they need to reshape the world." Jack's mind raced. "What are you talking about?" But before the architect could answer, a shot rang out. He crumpled to the ground, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. Jack turned to see Ryan standing in the doorway, his weapon still raised. "He was stalling," Ryan said, his voice cold. "We need to move." Back at the base, the team worked tirelessly to piece together the architect's final clues. They discovered a hidden server containing files on the syndicate's operations, locations, plans, and most importantly, the identities of their leaders. It was the break they'd been waiting for. But as Jack sat in the war room, staring at the screens filled with data, he felt a sense of unease. The architect's words haunted him. The design is already in motion. What had he meant? What were they missing? Ryan approached, his expression grim. "We've got a lead on the syndicate's main hub. It's time to end this." Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. "Let's finish it." The final mission was a blur of chaos and adrenaline. The syndicate's hub was a fortress, but the team moved with precision, dismantling defenses and neutralizing threats. Jack and Duke led the charge, their bond stronger than ever. When they reached the central control room, they found the syndicate's leaders scrambling to destroy evidence. But it was too late. The team secured the room, arresting the leaders and seizing the data. The syndicate was finished. As the dust settled, Jack stood in the control room, his chest heaving. Duke sat at his feet, panting but alert. Ryan approached, clapping a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You did it," Ryan said. "You took them down." Jack shook his head. "We did it. All of us." Ryan smiled, a rare moment of warmth. "You've come a long way from that diner, Malone." Jack looked down at Duke, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I guess I have." In the weeks that followed, the world began to heal. The syndicate's operations were dismantled, their leaders brought to justice. Senator Hayes survived the attempt on her life and became a powerful voice in the fight against corruption. And Jack? He found a new purpose, a new family in the team he'd fought alongside. But as he sat on the porch of the team's safe house one evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, he knew the fight wasn't over. There would always be another threat, another battle. And he would be ready. Duke rested his head on Jack's lap, his eyes closing as Jack scratched behind his ears. "We've got a good thing going, don't we, boy?" Jack murmured. Duke let out a contented sigh, his tail thumping softly against the ground. Jack smiled, his heart full. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. And as long as he had Duke by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. What do you think about Jack's journey from a diner manager to a key player in taking down a global threat? Could you have made the same choices he did, standing up for what's right even when it cost him everything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more action-packed, character-driven tales like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world, and it helps us keep creating stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.